Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about another really big ruling for Jack Smith that takes him a giant step, though not all the way to the finish line, for the most important testimony, I would say, in the whole post-election period. And that, if you've listened to me before, you know that must involve Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, among other things, like a completely sort of feckless chief of staff who was never able to say no to Trump, which is the number one job a chief of staff needs to be able to do, and just goes along repeatedly, and even though he talks out of both sides of his mouth to different folks, but he is, I've said this before, the first, the second, the third, and the fourth most important person for post-election and January 6th. He is everywhere. He goes down to Georgia to badger the legislature, and when Giuliani and others are giving them a whole load of crap to try to convince them to undo their election. He is the guy who's at Trump's shoulder sort of through all of it, although he professes, inability to do anything. People press on Ivanka sometimes, but during January 6th himself, he's fielding call after call after call saying, call it off. He's the guy who says, you heard him, Trump, he thinks Pence should be hanged. And in general, he takes his job to be, enabling Trump in all these different schemes. Nobody knows more. He's been through a combination of deft lawyering and good breaks, able to skate through the raindrops and avoid testifying to date. The January 6th committee, remember, subpoenas him, and he at first cooperates, gives just a cache of 1,000 emails, the ones that he wants to provide, and they've got all kinds of great stuff. Then he suddenly closes up shop and refuses to cooperate. The committee, remember, votes out contempt and votes to the Department of Justice, which doesn't follow through on a criminal motion. And I think it's pretty clear because the department concluded that he at least had some plausible executive privilege claim, at least under the way the department conceptualizes it. Not that it was correct, but that it was enough, I think, to say, I'm not sure we can prove guilty intent beyond a reasonable doubt. So he skates away there. And in the meantime, because he has sued the committee to keep from testifying, he's adverse to them, and they can't even comment on him. They take their duty as being one of two sides of litigation as being totally mum about him during all the time of the January 6th committee. So he sort of relatively fades from view, even though he is the most important witness. Okay, so finally, Jack Smith drops a subpoena on him and many other Trump loyalists who are also, in the center of things, but nobody quite like Meadows. But we're talking Ratcliffe and Cuccinelli and Miller, all people who know a lot and spend time with Trump. And the district court, this was actually Beryl Howe, her last act as chief judge, before passing the mantle on to Jeb Boasberg, the current lead person, the chief judge of the district court. And she rejected, to nobody's surprise, the executive privilege claim that he had used to try to safeguard or keep himself from testifying. Okay, so then the table was set, and as I say, no one was surprised because that claim has now gone up and down the D.C. circuit a few times, starting with Mike Pence's lawyer and chief of staff. Anyway, so Beryl Howe says, no, you have to testify, no executive privilege. And Meadows is going to push as hard as he can, as long as he can, but he's lost his biggest hope, because the panel of the DC Circuit held against him unanimously, upheld Beryl Howell's decision, say you have to testify, Mark Meadows. All right, now what's that leave for Meadows and Ratcliffe, Cuccinelli, Miller, etc. But Mark Meadows is the marquee, number one most important witness to all this stuff, and somebody who wants to have a future. If he's ordered to testify, I think if he goes up and commits perjury or whatever, it would be catastrophic for him. So it's a very promising possibility, but it ain't done yet. So first, he could ask the entire DC Circuit to reverse the decision of that 3-judge panel. That will take some time anyway. I think it's a loser, and I think they'll just deny it in relative short order. Then he can move the Supreme Court to take up the case. But at this point, they've already declined to do it. I don't see it happening. I especially don't see it happening in this context. So if he plays it out as long as he can buy himself few more weeks maybe until it's all done and he's been ordered to testify. Still, it's not over yet, because at that point, will Mark Meadows take the Fifth Amendment? There's, he, as I say, is just totally neck deep in all this stuff. If he takes the Fifth Amendment, he puts DOJ to a choice. One thing it can do is just, if they have the goods to make a case against him, they immediately can throw the book at him, indict him on very serious charges that he'd be looking, if he's convicted, at real prison time. And then he would have to quickly make a decision. Does he want to? He could force them to do it. That'll take a year or more. Maybe that gets him out of the woods. Although it's not clear that they're not going to see this through forever, especially if Biden wins. So he would be looking at serious possible jail time, but way down the road. He would, or they could give him immunity. That is, they could say, all right, we won't prosecute you. But now, when they do that, the Fifth Amendment privilege goes away, because the Fifth Amendment privilege is testimony that could tend to incriminate you. And if it can't incriminate you because you can't be charged, now you have to testify under compulsion of law. The DOJ policy is normally averse to giving immunity to such a culpable actor as Meadows is, second, I would say, only to Trump. But if that's the only way to secure his testimony against Trump, that'll be a hard decision for them. I expect his attorney, very good attorney, as I said, a former Deputy Attorney General, number 2 in charge of the whole department, George Terwilliger, will push for that. That's in his client's best interest. And that decision would go all the way up to Garland and Monaco. If they give him that, then boom, he's in the grand jury, and it is really bad news for Trump. If they have to charge him, then it's bad news for Mark Meadows and maybe eventually for Trump. So we've taken a giant step forward, along with the Mike Pence ruling that I'll talk about in another YouTube. We knew that Smith had really had very significant strides on the Mar-a-Lago case, especially with the ruling about Evan Corcoran. That's a much simpler, cleaner case, and it always seemed to be way more advanced than the January 6th case is. But now with this, the possibility that at least one or two January 6th cases really getting ripe becomes much more pronounced. And so one more arrow in the side of Donald Trump, who's is very possibly going to be in the open field and staggering around with blows he's taking from all sides. Mark Meadows' testimony is about the biggest thing that can happen for the January 6th day itself, and we are hugely closer to it now. So worth really following closely. We will. Until then, talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.